Well, after a disappointing 36-46 record, coaching a roster that now holds the distinction of being the highest costing in NBA history, and grappling with rumors of team disconnection and struggles to adjust, the Suns have officially parted ways with Mike Budenholzer. It's over. Again. That's right. A day, less than 24 hours after the season ended, the Suns let go of head coach Mike Budenholzer. So, of course, we got to talk about it. You know this, man. And that being said, I'm joined by Suns Geek, because whenever there's big news relative to the Phoenix Suns, we got to have Suns Geek on the show. And we are simultaneously casting this on both the Suns Geek channel, on the Suns Jam Session channel. Brandon, how you doing, man? Another coach. Let's go.
Another coach, another day. Oh, man, so much to talk about here. We had to go live on both channels, co-stream it live on both channels, and I'm ready to talk about this, man, because spoiler alert, it's going to be a long, long offseason, Suns fans. Buckle up.
Oh, yeah, big time. Going to be, I mean, this is the first of potentially many, many moves.
Oh, yeah.
This roster is going to look very different this time come August. And it'll be interesting to see the metamorphosis of the Phoenix Suns. So step one, bye-bye, buddy. Mike Budenholzer is gone. So we're going to talk about that and more on this edition of the Suns Jam Session podcast / simultaneous podcast. Oh, you have you have like an audio podcast now, right?
I technically have a quote podcast, but still learning how to like upload it more consistently because you got to pay for it.
Yeah.
But I'm a very young rookie in the podcasting world, but this will definitely go on the podcast.
Well, you're an OG in the video YouTube world. So if anybody happens to be watching, make sure you subscribe, like. If you're listening to the podcast at a later time, do the same. Tons of stuff to talk about, from the firing, the reasons kind of why the firing happened. Should it have happened? We're going to talk about that and much, much more. So crack them if you got them, my fellow Jamsters and Geek Squad out there. And let's go ahead and start this show.
Session podcast, shooting the shit about the Suns since 2019.
That's right. The Phoenix Suns are once again without a head coach, firing Mike Budenholzer today, which is going to make their fourth head coach in 4 years. So as we take a look at this, and obviously the news came out earlier today. It was Shams Charania who broke the news. What time was it coming out? Let's see.
Early.
9:02 a.m. Breaking. Yep. The Phoenix Suns have fired head coach Mike Budenholzer after finishing 11th place with a 46-36 record in one season, sources tell ESPN. He added a year after 49 wins, the 6th seed, and the number 13 ranked defense. The Suns plummeted to third worst in the NBA in defense and went 10-18 after the All-Star break. For the third straight offseason, the Phoenix Suns are changing coaches. So when you hear that, when you see the notification pop up, this is kind of standard operating procedure relative to questions that I asked Suns Geek after all these big moves happen, whether it's the Bradley Beal move or acquiring Kevin Durant or firing Monty Williams or firing Frank Vogel or hiring Mike Boone. When you see that notification come in, what goes through Suns Geek's mind?
Not surprised at all, and sort of a little bit of mixed emotions, but I will start off my thoughts by saying something that I actually tweeted earlier, which was I have been wrong about many, many things the past 2 seasons, and Mike Budenholzer was one of them. There's part of me that kind of wanted to maybe see, like, maybe we should have hung on to him just in case, but now that everything's come out, now that the story is more in the public and like people know that there was disagreements between him and Devin Booker, the lack of communication and really getting through to the players. And then, Chris Haynes, like a few hours ago, dropped something about Bradley Beal and like comparing him to Drew Holiday and how he took that offensively. And and not even that. That's really big. I mean, when you feud with the franchise player, you're pretty much gone. But I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. The games speak for themselves. Consistently losing by double digits or losing by like 20 or 25 night in and night out was absolutely embarrassing. So even if I at one point wanted to keep Mike Budenholzer one more year, it wasn't going to happen. It was a massive failure, huge disappointment. But again, I woke up this morning, checked my phone. I was like, oh, Mike Budenholzer got fired. Cool. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. It is what it is, man.
Yeah, some things you kind of feel and are coming down the pipe. And on Bright Side of the Sun, I already had my coach Mike Budenholzer is fired shell of an article written. I was just waiting for the Shams tweet to come through.
Yep.
And I literally, I mean, that came out this morning at 9:02, I said. By 9:07, I had a full-length 1,000-word piece published on Bright Side of the Sun about Mike Budenholzer being fired because we knew it was coming. And I'm with you, and I'm sure a lot of Suns fans would agree that after Frank Vogel last year, we felt that the team under his tutelage didn't take the next step that we thought they should, especially considering you had Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. And so, and these are cases that you and I made and things that I've written about. I thought that Budenholzer was going to be an improvement.
Yep.
Because we looked at Frank Vogel and we go, okay, defensive coach who is coaching a bunch of really, really good offensive players, and we're not who we should be. And you look at last year and it made sense, right? Like they were the fifth in the NBA in 3-point shooting percentage, but like 22nd in 3-point attempts. And we're like, okay, there's an opportunity there. And so Mike Budenholzer comes in, and with it comes excitement. With it comes another coach with a championship pedigree and somebody who brought with him a system that we believed would complement this Phoenix Suns team. And technically it did. This team shot more three-pointers than they ever have in the history of the organization by 16%.
That's awesome.
They shot 3,100 threes. The next highest amount of three-pointers was a couple of seasons ago where they shot like 2,700.
Yeah.
From a overall 3-point rate standpoint, 44% of the Suns' shots this year were from beyond the arc. That is the highest ever in the history of the franchise. But the defense was so void. This team was so disconnected on the defensive end, constantly and consistently. And with rumors that we'll get into, and you mentioned earlier from Chris Haynes on some of the things that went down behind the scenes that I think we were all kind of assuming were occurring, and were privy to some of the information that came out. It quickly was an instance in which there was a realization that, Mike Budenholzer ain't the guy. You know, we can have a debate about whether or not James Jones needs to go, but I don't think there was much of a debate about keeping Mike Budenholzer. Now, I'll ask you this. Obviously, people understood and expected that Mike Budenholzer would be gone as soon as today, and it played true to form. Only head coach, mind you, who's been fired today. Only.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
so it kind of says something unto itself.
Yep.
So it's not unexpected. The only case really that anybody could make for keeping Mike Budenholzer is the fact that it just gives the Suns a bad look. That anybody who's applying for a job here knows that this is like a win fucking now situation.
Yep.
So is there any part of that worries you, or was this just we need to kind of wash our hands of Budenholzer? It was a bad situation. He was a bad communicator. He did not connect with this team.
Yep.
Regardless of the fact that this roster is going to look very, very different this time or when the season begins, it doesn't matter. We don't need another year of Budenholzer. What are your thoughts on that?
Sort of gonna kind of talk about both things you said, but let me just start with, like, that would sort of be my only quote argument, if you will, about keeping Budenholzer was like, okay, well, we'll do whatever in the front office. We'll retool around Devin Booker, and we'll get actual, like, what I thought was going to be like a legit contending roster. That was my only like argument right there. But again, all these like stories that came out, the feuding with Devin Booker and all that, and again, the numbers don't lie. They speak for themselves. But to kind of talk about one thing you mentioned, I would be super nervous, even just applying for this Phoenix Suns coaching job. Because again, what is it, 4 coaches now in 4 years or
That's
whatever?
correct.
And clearly Matt Ishbia has money coming out of his ears because money is not a problem to him. He's fired 2 or 3 coaches now to not coach this team anymore. So he's paying coaches not coach this team anymore. I would be super nervous. The next coach they find, no matter who it is, I'm sure we're going to talk about it later, it has to be the guy, because I would be super nervous. But that's kind of what scares me too, man. Like, who would even want to coach this team?
Exactly.
Let's say we have an excellent offseason, which I thought we had an excellent offseason last offseason. Who the hell would want to coach this team knowing that, hey, if we're like fighting for the play-in tournament, I'm probably going to lose my job? Who would want this job, man? So I know I'm kind of going all over the place with my answer there.
No,
I feel like my argument with keeping Budenholzer was very, very low, and there's clearly it's not happening because he's gone now. But if I'm whoever is applying for the Suns coaching job, I would be really nervous about it.
I would be too, because again, it just showcases an instability from the top on down. And it's you can sit and you can go, hey, Budenholzer got a bad draw. James Jones, Josh Bartlestein, Matt Ishbia, they did not put him in a position to be successful. They did not put him or provide him with a roster that could win because of how top heavy it is. And unfortunately, due to the new CBA, the tax restrictions, the second apron restrictions do not allow for a team to be flexible. And if you have players like Bradley Beal, who play 53 games out of 82, Kevin Durant, who plays 62 games out of 82, guys who can't even qualify for all NBA honors because of their lack of availability. And those guys each take up, a third of your cap space. You're going to have issues. You can absolutely, if you're the Mike Budenholzer camp, that's what you're screaming right now. It's like, hey, he's paying for the sins of a poor roster, a roster that was poorly constructed. And we're going to go ahead. Oh, I saw Boyd was in here and then he left. So maybe he's in there for a long time and I didn't notice. But that being said, here's where it gets a little murky, Suns fans. And this was, as you mentioned before, Chris Haynes reported this out, put out about an 11, 12-minute YouTube video.
Yep.
The brief Haynes brief, whatever he calls it. And here's some of the things that he said. And this is where the challenges begin, where you say, okay, he was given a poor roster to manage. Well, he met with, at some point during the season, Bradley Beal, and he wanted Bradley Beal to be Drew Holiday. And that's something that wasn't received well by Beal.
Yep.
So talk about that. How do you take that? Mike Budenholzer goes to Bradley Beal at some point in the season, like, hey, man, we need you to be our Drew Holiday. What does that mean? That's the defensive guy. That's, the stalwart. That's the guy who's going to be a compliment offensively, which he was. He was a compliment.
Yep.
He was, 17 points a game.
Yep.
But we need you to lock in defensively. And Beal didn't take kindly to that.
Yeah.
Is that a realistic expectation to ask of Bradley Beal, or how do you take that?
So I'm going to kind of go all over the place with my answer. And I've said this so many times on my channel, and I'm sure on your podcast before. What we have to kind of remember here is we're not flies on the walls. We didn't actually hear these conversations go down. But I will say this, it does kind of seem from what I've read and heard that it kind of was a slap in the face in a way. Because, that's not Bradley Beal's game, man. Sure, Bradley Beal can compete on defense, but he's not a Drew Holiday on defense. And sure, I think Drew Holiday's kind of had a down year, might be because of injuries and stuff. But Drew Holiday's a fantastic player, man, especially a few years ago. So I think that it probably was a slap in the face. And this just goes back to what we've been talking about. Miscommunication with the players, feuding with Devin Booker, and just not being able to communicate and get these guys to lock in. I'm sure maybe he had good intentions with whatever he said to Bradley Beal, but I don't blame Bradley Beal for being, offended by this, if you will. What's up, Boyd?
Interesting. Well, we Boyd from the Aussie Suns fan podcast now joins us, and I you're joining us mid conversation, and I'm sure you're very well aware of what's going on. Chris Haynes makes the statement that Bradley Beal was offended that Mike Budenholzer asked him to be the Drew Holiday of the team. Do you think that's valid? Do you think that's valid for him to be offended to be asked to fulfill that role for this team?
So I got up at 2 a.m. Australia time and to take a piss, and then I got the live Shams notification saying that Buds was gone, and I was like, yeah, good. And I didn't get this little silver lining, this little caveat. You're saying that since then it's been reported that Bradley Beal took offense.
Yep. Yeah, so Chris Haynes reported out in a YouTube video. It's about a 12-minute video. It's definitely something you need to watch, especially as a Suns content creator. And that's one of the things that he said. I'm going over the things that he said, and this is the first thing that came to, he was talking about the miscommunication that Budenholzer had with the team and how players on the team didn't really like Budenholzer. And the first thing that he brought up was the fact that he asked Bradley Beal to be Drew Holiday, and Bradley Beal took offense to that. So I'll let you kind of think on that as I give my perception on it, then you can chime in. I think I'm offended that Bradley Beal's offended. Like, God forbid your coach asked you to play fucking defense, dude. If you are so thin-skinned and you're making $50 million a year, and you're brought in as an asset who's duplicative of what Devin Booker is. You operate in the same motherfucking space as him. And now your coach is going like, listen, man, like, we don't need you to be Devin Booker like you've been with Washington for 11 seasons. We need you to be more of a Drew Holiday type. We need you to be somebody who can handle the ball. Drew Holiday is a point guard, but you wouldn't classify him as one of the great point guards in the game. Yeah. And we're not asking Bradley Beal to be one of the great point guards in the game. He's simply saying, be a ball handler, do the little things on the defensive end, and be that dog. Be that dog. And I'm sure that's not how Budenholzer said it to him. Yeah. But if reports per Chris Haynes are correct, that he's asking him to be Drew Holiday and Bradley Beal took offense to that, it's yet another nail in the coffin as to reasons why I don't like Bradley Beal on my team. Now, there's other reasons why Budenholzer was fired per Chris Haynes, and I'm okay with the thought process behind those, the conversations that he had with Nurkic and with Booker, and the way that he told this team to be random. And again, these are things that we'll get into as factors as to why he was terminated today. But in the same breath, the first note that Chris Haynes said, I was like, oh, good. Have him play defense. That's what we wanted all season.
Yep.
Thoughts?
Boyd?
Yeah, so my mind goes first. I've just gotten out of back-to-back meetings, so I missed that part. But my mind initially goes to why is that being released as a reasoning?
Because Budenholzer got fired.
But is there any? Did it sound like there was possibly some laying some pavement to justify keeping Beal? As in,
no,
there was none of that.
Not in that context. It was literally as part of a narrative to explain how players did not agree with the methodologies of Mike Budenholzer.
And that was just one example.
That's one of them. I'm going to go into a couple more here.
More like the sole reason he was fired.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if that was the case, and Brad Beal, he didn't show us throughout the season that he took offense to anything that Bud was asking of him. I mean, we saw him. Was it last year under Vogel? We saw him peg up and take on the matchups like Zion and doing a job. I thought that was something that was being built on since last season. Like, it's always been asked of him in some regard, whether it was more vocal this season than it was last year under Vogel. I don't know, but you guys picked up on that last year? That was being asked of him then too.
And real quick, if I can just cut you off, Boyd, I swear to God, wasn't there like one conversation where like somebody went to Bradley Beal and said like, we need you to be Washington Wizards Bradley Beal again? Like, wasn't that Budenholzer? Or am I like crazy? Like, that's why I'm kind of like
player thing. That was, I think. That was
if it was, but I don't know where I was going with that. But Bradley Beal's a scorer, man. But you are kind of right, John. Like, you do what your coaches ask you to do. You do what's best for the team. And maybe Mike Budenholzer believed that was what was best for the team.
And even if it's something you can't necessarily execute, you listen to him and you go, hey, no, I appreciate the feedback, coach. Like, I don't know if that's something I can do. Like, Drew Holiday is an all-NBA guy. He's a two-time NBA champion. Like, I can try to play in that archetype with that archetype. But to Boyd's point, like, he showcased the ability to be somebody who wants to step up and take on that role. But I also don't know what to believe from Bradley Beal, because last week he was talking about how connected this team is, and we're great, and he's a lot of fucking fluff, man. He's a lot of fluff. And if the report is true coming out from Chris Haynes, that he took offense to it. Maybe it's just more fluff and it's more of him just kind of piling on at the end.
What?
Please.
Can we look at this in contrast to KD? He gets put in the softest trade discussion with the Warriors as okay, we're just listening type of a thing, and it's the fucking world is ending, right? And the world is ending, and he's now upset, and his little minions are out there, putting, beefing it up to be something massive. And you put that in contrast as to what Bradley Beal has had to put up with, as in coming from a Washington position where he is the number one for over a decade, and then being made third fiddle, and then being asked to do this, and then being asked to come off of the bench, and
but
then
he
being
wants
asked to wait, and then being asked.
Bradley Beal's a loser. He's been a loser his whole career. He gladly accepts an opportunity to be a third fiddle. And he, too, had an opportunity to be traded at the trade deadline, but due to his no trade clause, and they both had the same reasoning. Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal both didn't want to get traded, not because they didn't want the destinations, because they didn't want to have upheaval in the middle of the season. Durant said that. That's what Durant said. Durant said it wasn't that he's like, I didn't want to go to Golden State. He's like, I don't want to go to Golden State right now. And you're right, that gets exacerbated by the minions who are coming after you. And if you look at Kevin Durant just a little bit wrong, they're just going to try to crucify you. And when he gets traded, all of them are going to get traded. And it's going to be a glorious day in Phoenix. But one thing that doesn't exist is Bradley Beal stands. You notice that? You know how there's no Bradley Beal stands? No. That tells you something, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I feel like I feel like this is very much a lens that we're looking at it through, and a lot of it is driven by our emotions about his contract, about the no trade clause, which is nothing of his actual fault. And a lot of our hatred, and it's not hatred towards him, but we look further into things with Bradley Beal when he makes a comment like, well, the ball's in my court, I can do what I want with it type thing. And you see people going after him for saying things like that, but he is getting badgered with questions about his no trade clause, and
of course he is.
Why aren't you doing this, and why aren't you letting us just send you wherever we want to send you? Like, he's getting hammered with this every single day. He's having his family screamed at matches and shit like that. Like,
his family's not getting screamed at though. People around him or people around his family are saying negative things about him. They're just getting offended sitting next to him. It's not like they're directing their anger directly at him. I get what you're saying, but at the same time, like, he's sitting there smiling, saying, I've got all the cards, and I'm happy at the end of the day because I've got my no trade clause. Like, I mean, there is this sense of trolling that he has too. And I feel like Kevin Durant, like, we go after him too. The thing is he comes back after you. But where you have Bradley Beal just kind of sits there and goes, I'm happy. I got my no trade clause.
Yeah. And it's annoying. And
it is.
Yeah, I just feel like, for the most part, if it was me as a human being, I probably would have buckled, and I probably would have told some prick off a lot sooner than what Bradley has sort of snickerly sort of done. But regardless,
social media.
Regardless, I'm in the camp of let's move off of Bradley Beal if we can in the off season. I don't want to do all this wave and stretch or this buyout sort of thing that people are talking about.
You got to do something.
Yeah. I just feel like a little bit of patience. A lot of the moves that we've made, John, have been reactionary and I think have been impatient. And I think that doing something like that with Bradley Beal, if it's stretching it out over more years, or it's just eating up that massive amount of dead cap over the next couple of years, I think that's it's not great.
We'll talk about ways to fix the Suns this season throughout the offseason. Let's bring it back to Coach Budenholzer, because that's step one in fixing the Suns. And another
playing
thing,
random, playing random.
That's one of the issues that this team had. There was no defined roles for the big three. Per the Chris Haynes report, said that players on the team, the big three, thought that it was too random. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Isn't that what they wanted?
What was the playing random thing again?
That's what Chris Haynes said, that the team was frustrated that the big three had no defined roles, that they were too random.
Kind of brings me back to last season. Remember when it was like Bradley Beal and Devin Booker are the point guard? You know what I mean? And we had like a lot of trouble and a lot of conversations with that and a lot of turnovers. Like, if that is true, the guys really did not know their role, because it seemed like even though Devin Booker statistically had a great season, like we all knew he could be like so much better and so much more. And you know what? Even though Bradley Beal, there's a lot of Bradley Beal hate and slander going on, we all know Bradley Beal can be a lot better than what he was this season. So maybe guys didn't really know their role. Maybe that whole like play random thing was only like a Milwaukee Bucks thing, not a Phoenix Suns thing, man. Boyd, I think you're.
No, it was definitely. Well, I don't think it was just a. I think that's just a sign of him being not so great of a coach. Is the fact that he can go out there and have something so random and so broad and have that be the staple of your offense. Or yeah, I don't think that was isolated to just Milwaukee. And I can see how there would be confusion among the playing group if that's a large staple of what you're putting out there for him to sort of execute. But yeah, there was a lot of questions as to who was the main ball handler in this. There has been since day dot with the big three.
Yep.
And you know we've criticised them for being too ISO heavy, and then we bring in the Monties and the Tyus Jones,
mm-hmm.
and then it's like, yeah, but they're not alphas. They're not going to sort of overstep their mark too much. So you really needed a strong coach to come with more than just play random. He did need to define roles a lot better, I think. So
yep.
yeah, he can have all that smack, if you ask me.
And then, of course, there is he told, per Chris Haynes, he told Yusuf Nurkic that he was a bad teammate who doesn't set quality screens. And that is why Yusuf Nurkic felt disrespected on this messaging. And while ultimately he never played again, that he didn't want to play for a coach who called him a bad teammate, challenged who he was, and said he was somebody who doesn't set quality screens. And again, you're starting to see this issue with the team where there's messaging that Coach Budenholzer and the way that he approaches the feedback he's providing his team is not productive feedback, and it's falling upon deaf ears. He met with Devin Booker, and he told him he's too talkative, to tone it down so the coach's voice could be heard. These are the issues. This is the challenges that the team had with Mike Budenholzer. And, per John Gambadoro, who was posting today, and he said this earlier in the year where, Bud was somebody who nobody liked in that locker room. Per Gambadori said Bud was not the only reason for the Suns' failures, but he was a huge reason. He was the most obvious and glaring issue this year. Suns are going to make a lot of other changes. This is just the beginning. And he also added that he's not usually a fire the coach guy, but this guy was a disaster and needed to go. There was no way he could have come back. I do not know of one person in the organization that liked dealing with him. Ego was just too big. Coach like he wanted to be fired. That's all from Gambo. So what do you Suns Geek, what do you think about all that? The messaging to Nurk, the messaging to Booker, the insight that John Gambadoro has into this team. What do you think of all that collectively?
Yeah, if Gambo's, reporting here is true, and like 100% of the time it is, it's accurate. That's brutal, man. Especially if it's like not one person in the organization, like Budenholzer, and he was hard to work with, bad communicator. And real quick with the use of Nurkic thing, man, that was another thing I was wrong about. I thought that him and Nurkic were like really cool. Like I think during the summer he went to like go visit him across seas and all that, and they were in a gym and they took a picture and all that, and just so many backfires, man. But especially if you're calling like Nurkic a bad teammate, like that's just going to suck out his confidence, telling him that he's not setting hard screens. But yeah, if it was a pretty much a consensus, if that's the right word, decision, like where everybody in the organization did not like working with Budenholzer, that is bad news. And real quick, I wanted to say this earlier in the podcast because I received a couple tweets and I received like some comments just like on Instagram or whatever, on Twitter. There are a few people who sort of in a way like me didn't think that Budenholzer should have been fired to an extent, shouldn't have been, fired to an extent. And I told one person specifically, I was like, no, I was like, in most sports, if not all sports, the head coach usually goes first.
Mhm.
Like, John, I know you're a big football guy. Coaches always go first. I know like nothing about football, but I know that for a fact. And in the future, we're going to see if the GM goes next. But I just wanted to remind people that coaches always go first. Is Mike Budenholzer 100% to blame for the Suns' failures? No, but he is a big part of the blame, just like Gambo said. But he's not like 100% of the reason. But clearly there was a huge disconnect, top to bottom. People did not like him, and he's no longer our coach.
What do you think, Boyd?
I will say I'm not surprised to hear all this stuff coming out, and there's been
Yep.
little telltale signs throughout the season, and there's signs that I didn't see with the likes of Monty and the likes of Vogel previously, and it's the Devin Booker stuff, and I think Booker was a little bit more boisterous on commenting in post-game presses about how the game was being played and what he feels needs to be changed. And it just felt like it was just a bit different coming from Booker than it had in previous years. So, look, that does not surprise me. Now, I've always been one that's leaning towards it's the players, it's not the coaches. Similar to what Gambo's saying.
Yep.
Mhm.
I've always been under the impression that it was from the players' standpoint, that the fish rotted from the head, as in our big three, as big two, and no coach was going to have any luck with that. But there were definitely more hints throughout the season about Bud just not really connecting, and it starts and ends with Booker, how vocal he was about it, and the fact that it was reported that he got told to shut up when we're all screaming for leadership. And we want voices out there in huddles. We want voices on the court. That's the sort of shit that we really felt that, affected the way that we played as a team on both sides of the court. So, yeah, look, it does not surprise me. It does not surprise me. It all starting to make sense with this Chris Haynes things that I have to watch this, mate. I have to watch
Boyd,
this.
I'm kind of glad you said that too. And I'm kind of paraphrasing what was said here, but I think it was Brandon Clean from the Locked On Suns podcast. He asked Devin Booker, like, are you going to be more involved in like talking to like the decision makers and et cetera of this team? And I think Booker said, like, I'm going to talk to everybody. And that's another reason probably why Mike Budenholzer like shut him down and told him to lower the tone. But at this, to your point, Boyd, we needed those locker room leaders. We needed Devin Booker, who's our franchise leading scorer, our franchise guy, to speak up. And I'm so glad that Booker, like, especially near the end of the season, he started like talking a little more like, oh, like we need to communicate better and we have no winning culture and culture this, culture that, and communication this. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Boyd, because don't be surprised if Devin Booker has a lot of say in what the Suns offseason looks like.
Well, I just feel like he was kind of done with Budenholzer, and he finally said, "Fuck it, I'm going to start doing it." Because
I'm
he was
so glad he did.
He was at one point muted this season, and it's like I said, as the season progressed on the post-game podcasts, there's no one without blame. Every person up and down this organization, from the owner all the way down to, fucking Ty Washington, I mean, everyone has should have some semblance of accountability, and Devin Booker should as well. And he took 100%. Some, and he said it, and I respect him for it, and I think that that's something that we all respect. You talk about the Jusuf Nurkic comments, and I'd be frustrated too. And as somebody who watched Jusuf Nurkic for the past couple seasons, I wouldn't go as far as say I'm a Nurkic defender, but I respect what he did. I mean, he rebounded. There were shot deterrents, and I thought he set good screens.
Yes,
he would. He would. If you take a look, he played in just 25 games for the Suns, and he's fourth on the team with 112 screen assists. Plumlee's number one overall. He had to play 74 games, and he had 161. So there's a variance of 50, despite the fact that he played in 50 more games. Points off of screen assists, 257. That's second on the team. And that's in 25 games played. All he did was set screens. And this just goes back to, when you talk about him muting Booker and you talk about him telling Nurkic that he's a bad teammate, it's bad messaging from a coach. It's somebody not reading the room or providing effective feedback. He might have meant well with the feedback, but the way that he provided it clearly didn't settle right with the players. And it goes back to like the Frank Vogel situation, right? You know, that report that came out that after a Clippers game and the team got fucking smoked in LA, that Vogel, who's kind of been this calm, cool, collected guy, went in and he kind of had a rant on the team. The team thought it was funny more than anything, not serious, because it didn't align with who he was. Whoever we bring in next is going to have somebody who has the ability to connect with these players and get down on a person-to-person level, so it's a comfortable space to provide feedback. And that was always my issue with Yusuf Nurkic. I'm like, you have issues with rebounding. You have issues with defense. Now, Nurkic isn't a complete player. No one ever said he was. He was a $16 million a year center. We got exactly what we fucking paid for. But the fact that we would not play him anymore because of some mental feud that went on between him and his head coach was a failure for the head coach and James Jones, Bartleston, and Ishbia to not put every one of those motherfuckers in a room and talk it out like grown-ups.
Preach.
You know, and Nurkic could say, it's like, hey man, this guy just called me a bad teammate. He says I don't set hard screens. And that could have been an opportunity for Mike Budenholzer. I said Mike Vogel. Mike Budenholzer.
Hey, same thing at this point.
Same thing at this point.
But
it would have been a good opportunity for him to say, hey, that might be what you heard, but that's not what I meant. And I apologize. Allow me the opportunity to state what I really meant. You know, I need screens in certain situations. I need you to be better for your team in certain situations. There's always a way to wordsmith it to get your point across, unless that's actually what Budenholzer meant, that he was a bad teammate. He didn't set quality screens. So with all that being said, there's no surprise that he's gone. There's no surprise that he is going to be paid $10 million a year for the next 4 years to play or to coach or to not coach. You know, if he does coach, then what's his nugget? Matt Ishbia doesn't have to pay him. But there's also a lack of Monty Williams. Exactly. But there was a lack of continuity with this team as well. And if you're somebody who is pro Budenholzer, doesn't think that he should have been fired and there should be more onus on the players, you know, there was a lack of continuity. And part of this I would put on Budenholzer. And this is where I have a question for you guys.
You know what time it is.
Trivia time.
All right, gents. How many different starting lineups did the Phoenix Suns have this season?
Ooh.
If you're listening in the chat or you're live on the chat, whether you're on the Suns Geek channel or you're on the Suns Jam Session channel, go ahead and take a guess. How many, 82 games, how many different starting lineups did the Phoenix Suns have this season?
37?
Okay.
I will go with I'll go a little bit light. No, I'll go with 40 just to go.
40. Okay. So Suns Fever says 54. Jake B says 35. 53 from Saul. 20 from David Roy. 34 from Mark Brooks. 16 from King Nacho. 25 from Keith Nettles, who actually joined us yesterday at the backyard to watch the final game of the season. What up, Keith? It was a pleasure meeting you. 45 from Mike Evans. Equipment manager, fallen founder. 33. 36 from Queen Chantel. It was 35. There was 35 different starting lineups. And that's, again, one of the issues that this organization found with their head coach was the fact that there was a lack of continuity, and they felt that some of it was because of Coach Budenholzer, because he wasn't playing Ryan Dunn, which the whole fan base, I mean, we were beating the drum the entire time. But I'll ask you a backup question. Okay, the lineup that was used the most times was Tyus Jones, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Yusuf Nurkic. How many times did they start as a starting five?
Oh, well, that would have. Nurk wasn't even there for the whole shindig. So I'm going to say 15.
Okay.
22.
So we got 22 from Suns Geek. We got 15 from Boyd. We got 12 from Suns Fever. We got 20 from Keith Nettles. 19 from Mark Brooks. 16 from Final Boss Roy my Via. 25 from Jake B. 16. Oh, he changed his number. Okay. Saul says 22. The answer is 10.
Oh, God.
What do you think their record was in those 10 games?
3-7.
Okay. 3-7.
Nah,
Boyd, what do you think?
It'd be above 500 because I think in that patch we weren't too bad.
Were we like 9-2?
Well, you think we started really well.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go with just a smidgen over 500. And out of how many games was it, John?
10.
10. I'll go 7-3.
So we got 6-4 from Mark Brooks and Suns Fever 83. We got 5-5 from Final Boss, 8-3 from Saul because it's 11 games, 2-8 from David Roy, 8 out of 10 from Keith, 7-3 from Dagoberto Ortiz. Boyd's right, 7-3.
I don't know why I thought 3 and 7.
7-3. So think about that. Think about everything I just went through. This team in 82 games, 35 different starting lineups. Now there's injuries in there, of course.
Yep.
And then the starting five that was successful at the front end of the year, you 7-3, and it was only used 10 times. Now, granted, if you look at the grand scheme of things, I think the Suns had like the 7th most starting lineups. I went through every team. I forget who was number one, but it was like 47 different starting fives.
Probably like the Hornets or whatever team was like super injured this year.
Hornets wasn't that bad. It was like Brooklyn or something. I have it somewhere. But this is another reason, again, that Chris Haynes stated as to why Budenholzer was fired. Because of a lack of a miscommunication with the players, the way that he approached them. And then from just a tactician standpoint, playing too random, there's no continuity in the lineups. And, young players like Ryan Dunn, who can guard 1 through 3, 1 through 4, sat out for like 2 months. It just didn't make sense. So for all those reasons, this is going to be most likely the last time that you are going to see this drop on the Suns Jam Session podcast.
Play fast, play random, play together, play in great space. Let's go play some basketball. Have some fun.
Budenholzer, 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 Budenholzer.
As I walk through this world, nothing can stop Mike Budenholzer. And you are my Budenholzer.
And no one can hurt you.
One last time, ladies and jamsters. One last time. It was the Philadelphia 76ers had 54 different starting lineups. Dallas had 47. The Pelicans had 47. Utah had 46. Charlotte had 45. Brooklyn had 44. Toronto had 39. Golden State had 38. And then Washington and Phoenix both had 35. The teams with the least amount of a change in their starting five, the Knicks only had 12 different starting fives, and the Spurs had only 12 different starting fives. So there you go. Now, that being said, now we look to the future. Now it's the time when we start going, okay, who can replace Mike Budenholzer? And we do have a super chat that I'll get to here in a second. But the first question that Mark Brooks has in the chat, how does everyone feel about Mike Brown or Taylor Jenkins? And then final boss Roy Maivia gave $1.99 in the super chat. He said, would Willie Green be good for this team? So the list that was provided by Chris Haynes on the Haynes brief was the following names: Willie Brown, Mike Brown, Chris Quinn, Johnny Bryant, Sean Sweeney, Jared Dudley, Royal Ivy, David Fisdale, Kevin Young. A lot of different names there. With all of those names being provided, where would you like the Suns to go? What kind of direction, what kind of coach needs to coach this team?
This is where my quote analysis is going to be pretty bad, because I kind of tweeted this out earlier too. This is like one of the first off seasons, if not the first off season, where I have absolutely no clue what the Phoenix Suns are going to do. One of those reasons, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it in a future podcast, is because I don't even know who's going to be running this front office in the future. So I really have no clue. But out of the list of names, I mean, everybody obviously is, a candidate for sure. But like, do we need more of a player's coach, or do we need like an experienced veteran, which I thought we had that in Mike Budenholzer and Frank Vogel, but I guess we didn't. Guys that have won championships.
Oh, we did.
And all that. Yeah,
we definitely did. We had that.
I just have no clue. Your guess is as good as mine, but maybe somebody who can actually relate and connect to Devin Booker, somebody that knows Devin Booker a lot better than Budenholzer and Frank Vogel did. And I just wanted to say one thing. I already saw a lot of stuff from fans saying, like, we should get Chris Paul. And even though Chris Haynes mentioned it, Willie Green. Well, Willie Green is still technically the coach of the New Orleans Pelicans right now. I mean, sure, he'd get fired at any moment, but he's still the coach of the Pelicans. Chris Paul is playing for the San Antonio Spurs and just played in all 82 games. Chris Paul's not coaching this team, you guys. Boyd, what do you think?
What do I think? I mean, the name that I like is Willie Green. That was actually in another report, a name that came up. Now with Dave Griffin being ousted, that was a Dave Griffin hire. As was Aaron Nelson, our fucking old medical trainer.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get them both back in the package.
For real.
But I think that they actually sacked Nelson at some stage as well. But anyway, look, Jared Dudley is the one that I want to say. I just don't know if he has the. I think he'd be a great players guy. I think he'd probably lean too far into being that pally players coach. I'd want someone with a bit more on the X's and O's front. Got another guy not named, but these are guys that you got to poach from somewhere else. Is a Will Hardy type over there at Utah. Seems to be a mover and shaker, a younger coach that I think is would be a good fit. But we don't know. You shouldn't need someone to be friends with Devin Booker to coach your team. As long as they're progressive, but also can whip someone into gear and get the ear and not get laughed out of a fucking locker room, for God's sakes.
That's why I think they should be cool with them, like relate to Devin Booker and connect with them. And like you said, an X's and O standpoint. Sorry, Boyd.
Let's look, Taylor Jenkins. He's the Memphis guy. Is that Jenkins?
That was Taylor Jenkins. Yeah. Yep. Michael Malone is Denver.
Given what he's done in the circumstances that he was dealt with, a season where there was a miraculous amount of injuries and what he did with that squad, I'd like to see something like that replicated for us, given our injury woes. But we're not going to look the same next season. So I like Jenkins. I like Willie Green. Pie in the sky is a Will Hardy for me. But if I'm going out of that list, it's going to be a Fizdale or a Jared Dudley for mine.
So John Gambadaro said that Mike Malone, Taylor Jenkins, not going to happen. And I'm okay with that because, in my opinion, they are both just replicas of what we just had. We just had old school coaches, hard-nosed coaches, my way or the highway coaches. And while that's not a bad thing, those guys are getting fired all over the league. Mike Malone just got fired with 5 days left in the season. Taylor Jenkins fired with 2 weeks left in the season. This new generation of players doesn't respond well to those kind of coaches. Right? You need somebody who, again, as I mentioned, has the ability to get on the level with the players and create and foster an environment where feedback can be provided in a professional manner and they can take it and not feel like they're being called out. And it's this tough line to walk. So Willie Green is somebody everybody's excited to hear the name, and I am as well, because we know what he did while with Phoenix. We saw what he did with the Pelicans. And you remember when the Pelicans were really pesky, we played them in the first round that year prior to in Game 7. That was a pesky team that knew Phoenix, and we liked what we saw. Even during the regular season. 100%. The other name that really kind of gets me excited is Chris Quinn.
Yep.
And he's the assistant coach out there in Miami. He's somebody who the players have loved. The Heat culture, quote unquote, has been said to be built in large part by Quinn. I'm kind of impartial to him. He's a Notre Dame guy. He went to Notre Dame for 4 years.
I think he was a former player too, right?
He was, yeah. He played 8 years from 2006 to 2013.
Wow.
Played on 4 NBA teams, 1 G League team, and overseas in Spain and Russia.
Nice.
And Jimmy Butler had this to say about Quinn after he drew up a game-winning play for the Heat one time. He said, that's what happens when you get a guy from Notre Dame that's smart. He's going to be a head coach one day very, very soon. He's one of those, a younger guy, ability to connect, ability to relate. Sam Cassell is another guy that wasn't on Chris Haynes' list, but if he becomes available, he's currently an assistant coach with the Boston Celtics.
Yep.
He's somebody that I would be very, very interested in. Royal Ivey, that's another name that was mentioned by Chris Haynes, assistant coach with the Houston Rockets. He's the guy who led South Sudan in the Olympics last year. And, he's been an assistant coach with the Thunder and the Knicks and the Nets and currently the Rockets. And just a 10-year NBA vet, outstanding job with underdog teams, grit, just another guy to kind of keep an eye on. So it'll be interesting to see who the Suns pursue and when they're going to pursue him, because time now becomes of the essence, because as Suns Geek mentioned, we don't know what's going to go on with the front office.
Yeah.
There were reports out there that James Jones's contract's up. I'll tell anybody, show me where that says that. Other than Evan Sittery fucking tweeting.
Well, in all fairness, I believe I actually saw that on PHNX. I don't know how much that is true, but I will say, and we talked about this yesterday, John, James Jones has been with us for a long time. That contract's had to be up either this year or next.
Well, they re-signed him in 2022.
Is
okay.
Is Gerald Bourguet?
Do we know how much
dating Evan Sittery's stuff now?
But do we know how much the contract was for?
We don't. We don't know how much it
I'm
was
just saying,
for and
he's
and
been
the
here
duration.
for a long time, man. I'm just saying.
But here's where I come with James Jones. And this is another debate that people have, whether or not the general manager should be fired because of the sins of the trades, right? Bradley Beal is here. Kevin Durant is here. Those both happened under James Jones's watch. And this is where I, obviously not privy to conversations that happened between James Jones and Josh Bartlestein and Matt Ishbia when these transactions were occurring. But I'm kind of one of those people who it's like, okay, you start building, you have a backyard, right? And you're working on your backyard. And then all of a sudden somebody buys your house and says, we're putting a pool in. And you're like, well, hold on. Like, I just put in my sprinkler system. I got the Bermuda laid nice. It looks, I got a plan here to make this backyard look great. He's like, nope, put in a fucking pool. You're like, dude, a pool costs a ton of money. He's like, just put it in. And you put it in, and it's like nobody comes over to your house now because there's no shade over the pool. The plumbing's horrible. It's like, do you fire the guy who executed the plan? And that's where I kind of feel with James Jones. It's like, he was here. He executed. He was in the process of executing a plan. He brought us to an NBA Finals. We had a 64-win season after that. He had an opportunity to get Kevin Durant the following season, but he chose not to. And then Ishbia showed up, and then next thing you know, a day later, Kevin Durant's here. And then that summer, boom. Mark Bartlestein, Josh Bartlestein's dad, is the agent of Bradley Beal. Next thing you know, he's in Phoenix. But James Jones is at fault. Again, people have their own kind of thoughts and processes on it. But I don't know. I think with this upcoming offseason, I hope that Matt Ishbia goes, you know what? I got in James Jones's way of his vision. I got excited. I was trying to hit home runs instead of hitting doubles, and I swung and I missed both times. James, you know the state of the situation. You know what we need to do. I want you to work on this. I want you to fix it this upcoming offseason, because if he doesn't, you're going to have to now find a new general manager, and the clock is a ticking. We are, 2 months shy of the draft already.
That's what I was going to say, John. I know that Suns Twitter and like the chats and all that, we like rarely agree on a lot of things, but can we agree that if we keep James Jones and then like we lose in the playoffs next season, he's gone, right? Can we all for once agree on that? Like if he's not on the hot seat now, like his seat's got to be burning.
But like, what if you lose in like game 7 of the second round again?
He's gone. We didn't win a championship. I don't know. That's how I look at it.
What do you think, Boyd?
Yeah, I like James Jones. I like him. I think he's with a lot of scraps, multiple times he's put together what looked on paper from a general manager's standpoint should have worked. And it's come down to execution, and it's come down to buy-in to a certain level. So I don't hate the job that he's done. Fair enough, he looks at YouTube for scouting, but he's also hit. He's missed. Everyone misses.
Yep.
Everyone misses. But
every team in the league. Yep.
He has taken the right advice and hit on some guys who, if we didn't have, we wouldn't have Kevin Durant. We couldn't have used Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges in that to get Kevin Durant. Sure, the trade got made for Bradley Beal, but when you think about it and you put your you go back in time and we were down on Chris Paul. We were down on that contract, the size of it. We were down on him never being
Injury
healthy
history.
again. And then he goes and plays 82 fucking games this season. It's like, fuck. But
Yeah, of
but
course.
yeah, look, the timing of everything is very is something that's forgotten, and the actual emotions at the time. I was down. I remember you not being down with the whole Bradley Beal thing, but it was widely considered a steal. And it was getting off of Chris Paul, who was, going to be a reason why we couldn't take that final leap. Look, and ultimately, this team has a massively high ceiling, but it always had a terribly low floor, and we just ended up on the floor of it. And yeah, James Jones for mine, he stays. And I think you're right, John. I think he needs to be given a little bit more leeway to do things his way. But yeah, look, I've liked what he's done more. I think that it outweighs what he's done wrong.
I agree. And I see Saul in the chat. He says, only thing I disagree with John, JJ has to go. And Saul's not alone in that thought process. And Suns Geek's not alone, because Suns Geek and I were having this conversation while we were at the backyard yesterday about what to do with James Jones, what we think will happen, what should happen. Yep. And a lot of people think he should be fired. And I don't fault anybody for disagreeing with my thoughts on that. Again, the one thing that I'll say is I just think that he has been put in a tough situation. And I think the Athletic reported it. They said something today along the lines that when Ishbia and Bartlestein showed up, they really took control of the transactional aspects of the operation. That's what your general manager's there for. He has the contact. He's got the guys on the phone, right? It's like, hey, we need to call Brooklyn. He's like, cool, I got Joe Tsai's number right here. He's like, all right, I know you were in talks with him over this past summer about acquiring Kevin Durant. We want him. And James Jones and reports were that he didn't want to include Cam Johnson in the deal. And Matt Ishbia was like, you make it happen. So he went and he did it. And so I think that a lot of people have this frustration with James Jones for being the yes man, maybe. And I think that I can't fault him for that. I think that obviously only Ishbia and Jones and Bartlestein knows what those conversations were. And that's probably why James Jones hasn't been fired too. Because Ishbia knows, he's like, hey, I was the driving force behind a lot of these shit transactions. And I can't just fire a guy because of who did my bidding. Maybe I should take a step back. And that's why one reason I hope he buys like the White Sox. I think him and his brother and talks about buying the Chicago White Sox. Like, good, go play with them for a while. Let James Jones do his thing. So that being said, taking a look at some of the chat and some of the opinions in the chat. I want to bring these up before we get out of here. Jake from the Suns Planet podcast says Nick Nurse. The Hoya Destroyer, talking about Patrick Ewing, Rajah Bell. You should not.
Emilio Estevez.
Let's go get Leandro Barbosa as our coach.
Yeah.
Like, why not?
Jake should not be allowed to have a podcast with these kind of takes, man. Abraham Alacron says Mike Brown, he was amazing for the Kings. What do you guys think of Mike Brown? Obviously fired midway through this season, was replaced by Doug Christie up in Sacramento. A weird situation up in Sacramento, but has done a good job. Did a good job with that team for a while. Yep. Would you be a fan if Mike Brown was the head coach?
I wouldn't love it, but I wouldn't hate it either. Like, I've always been a Mike Brown fan, but like I wouldn't be like jumping up and down like, oh my gosh, we got Mike Brown.
I don't know if I'm going to be jumping up and down for anyone. I will not allow myself to jump up and down for anyone.
I wouldn't love it, but I wouldn't hate it.
I need something.
I'm jumping into the ocean.
I don't know. Like, I don't know.
What do you think of Mike Brown, Boyd?
Yeah, look, he was at a shit show. I'm just wondering, what were the reasonings for him leaving? Was it a De'Aaron Fox butting heads and then they end up tossing him anyway?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, they canned him and then they traded De'Aaron Fox like 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And then they played like really good. Now they're like in the play-in tournament.
You kind of convinced me on having that more of that players player coach type of a guy. Mike Brown probably leans the other way a bit more. So for that reason, probably not. But yeah, his resume with what he done with the fucking Sacramento Kings, can't be fucking, laughed at. It's good. Yeah. So, I'd cop it, but I'd fucking, at the moment, you'd have to convince me. Like a lot of the names that were thrown out there, I'd take it and I get excited about it because
I won't.
I need something.
Jake B in the chat. What if the Clippers lose round one and Tyronn Lue steps down? They won't. He just signed a massive extension.
Yeah.
We've been seeing this name a lot. What are your guys' thoughts? It says
No.
final boss Roy Maivia says Steve Nash, or am I crazy?
No, he doesn't seem committed. He's fucking.
Yeah, I agree with Boyd. And he just started that podcast with LeBron James, dude. Like he could get any broadcasting job he wants. He does not need to be a coach. And again, going back to this argument, does Steve Nash really want to like sign a contract and be our coach, knowing that he could get fired in 1 year? Sort of like the Brooklyn situation. Am I right? He was there for like
100%.
1 or 2 years. Like he's not going to be our coach.
No thanks.
All right. Well, we're getting ready to wrap this up right here, right now. Tell me, who's the next Phoenix Suns head coach?
Chris Quinn.
Yeah, I like a couple of them names that you mentioned there, but I'm just going to hang on Willie Green because he's familiar and he has the relationships already set.
John, after you give your answer,
I think it's Chris Quinn.
I just wanted to say one thing about Chris Quinn. Do not forget that he is part of that Eric Spoelstra tree.
Exactly.
And clearly, I mean, obviously this season they didn't have much success, but the Miami Heat have had a lot of success over the years. He's been a big part of that. So I'm thinking Chris Quinn. But if Willie Green does get fired, maybe Willie Green. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Chris Quinn, and even if it happens, I will not be excited. So on that note, ladies and jamsters, members of the Geek Squad, and whatever you call the Aussie Suns fan podcast watchers, what do you call them?
Losers. Fucking love them.
And the losers who watch the Aussie Suns fan podcast. We appreciate you taking a little time out of your day to watch this show. Bye-bye, buddy. Boyd, go ahead and tell everyone where they can follow you and be a loser.
Mate, follow us. Be a loser at Aussie Suns fans on the Twitter, at Aussie Suns fans on the Instagrams, and at Buds83 on Twitter for my personal.
Suns Geek.
Yep, just search Suns Geek and you'll find me. Clearly, we're going to have a very, very long off season, and I'm going to do my best to break it all down, bring you guys videos and content and live shows, and collaborate with all of you guys and many other Suns pods this off season because it's only April 14th. We have lots of time to do shows.
Absolutely. And of course, my name is John Voida. You can follow me at Darth Voida on Twitter and read all my writing at brightsideofthesun.com. We have a ton of great content coming out, just articles that were posted today. Obviously, we were all over the firing of Mike Budenholzer. We have 5 coaching candidates for the Phoenix Suns. We have a very depressing piece I wrote about the team, reasons why James Jones should be fired. That's written, by one of our writers. So plenty of things. We're trying to hit all angles. I got pieces coming out this upcoming weekend on why we should trade Kevin Durant, why we shouldn't trade Kevin Durant. So if you like to read, pop over to brightsideofthesun.com. I truly appreciate it. And on that note, ladies and jamsters, go home. Love your family.
Hey, you're listening to the Suns Jam Session podcast, shooting the shit about the Suns since 2019.